He's taking my wife as his date, my wife, and I'm supposed to clap? That's what I muttered under my breath. After Martin Hayes, smug, overtanned, twice-divorced CEO of Alturas Consulting, reached across the white linen tablecloth, rested his hand on the back of my wife's chair like he owned it, and said, "She's riding with me tonight. Try not to slow her down." Then he winked at me. A goddamn wink. The laughter around the table was polite, controlled, the kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if it's actually funny or if they're just trying to keep their jobs. That laugh is the sound of fear, dressed up in a tie. I didn't laugh. I smiled. Faint. The kind of smile you give when the decision's already been made, like the moment you decide not to swerve when a squirrel darts across the road. My wife, Claire, didn't look at me. She didn't touch my arm, didn't try to soften the blow with a whispered, "It's just optics, honey." She just sipped her wine, eyes fixed on her plate, like her silence somehow made her innocent. The silence screamed louder than the joke. And that, right there, was the moment something inside me stopped. Not broke, stopped. Like a fan blade that had been spinning quietly in the background for years, finally flicked off. No more motion, no more hum. Let me tell you something. If you're listening to this and you're one of those guys who thinks keeping your head down buys you peace, I've been you. And I can promise, peace bought with silence is just the lease you sign before humiliation moves in. This story, it's for you. For the 90% of you listening right now who haven't subscribed yet, hit that follow. It's free, it helps the team keep doing this, and trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Anyway, Martin didn't even look at me when he said it. That's what made it worse. It wasn't an insult delivered to me. It was launched through me, like I was glass, like I wasn't even part of the conversation. My name wasn't spoken once during that lunch, and yet everything said was about me. I looked around, 3 VPs, 1 finance head, a legal rep, all men, all chuckling like frat boys who'd already picked a side. Claire laughed once too, softly, almost reflexively, but it was there. Her hand never moved from her wine glass. That same hand that used to hold mine under tables at events like these when Martin was just that asshole with the title. But things change. Alturas had grown fast. 5 years ago, it was a boutique firm. Now, mid-cap giant. Clients in Singapore, Germany, Austin. Martin called himself a global operator like it was a pickup line. He wore designer suits that were always one button too tight and had a watch that cost more than my first car. He thrived on dominance, not success, dominance. He didn't build a company, he built a kingdom. And every kingdom needs a court jester to mock. I was his favorite. But here's what he never realized. Jesters take notes, and some of them are playing a much longer game. Claire and I had been married 15 years. She started as a project manager, sharp, driven, patient with chaos. I'd always admired that. She rose quickly, especially after I stepped back to handle my brother's estate. When he passed, Martin promoted her fast, too fast. And when I asked how she was getting along with him, she said things like, "He's demanding, but he believes in me. And don't be jealous just because I'm doing well." That's what manipulation sounds like when it's wearing a silk blouse. Now, to be clear, I'm not a saint. I wasn't the most exciting guy. I'm quiet. I listen more than I speak. I read contracts, not tea leaves, but I pay attention. And I saw the shift. Started with late meetings. Then came the gala invites, plus ones that I was always welcome to attend, but never quite expected at. Once she told me flat out, "Martin says it's important I look independent. Not just the wife of someone. You understand that, right?" I said, "Sure." And I meant it until I didn't. Because what I started noticing wasn't just distance, it was omission, selective updates, empty explanations. Her perfume started changing. Her phone never faced up anymore. Our conversations dried up into scheduling logistics. She started saying things like, "You're too sensitive," when I asked simple questions. I wasn't jealous. I was attentive. There's a difference. Martin fed off the tension. I saw it in the way he touched her shoulder just a beat too long, the way he mentioned her name in meetings, even when it wasn't relevant. Once, during a holiday party, I caught him whispering something to her. She laughed, then stopped when she saw me watching. That was 6 months ago. I didn't confront her. I researched. Because while Martin was flashing wealth, I was quietly remembering something he forgot. That in the original filings of Alturas Consulting LLC, there were 2 names, Martin Hayes and Daniel Mercer, me, but I'll get to that. You'll see. Because that luncheon, that comment, that was the last time anyone at that table laughed at me. The next time we'd be in a room together, the only sound would be the creaking of chairs as people chose sides. And Martin? He'd finally realized that the man he looked through wasn't glass. He was a mirror. Claire came home from the office that evening humming. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something that didn't matter, just moving a spoon through muscle memory. She walked past me, heels clicking on the hardwood, and dropped her bag near the stairs, like it lived there now. There was a new tightness to the way she moved, that practiced elegance, the kind of posture people wear when they know someone is watching. And enjoying the view, she didn't kiss my cheek, didn't ask about my day, just looked over her shoulder and said, "I won't be late." "Dinner's at 7, I replied without turning. She hesitated. "Don't wait up." Translation: Martin already ordered the wine. She disappeared upstairs. The bedroom door clicked, a zipper slid open, then silence. I didn't follow. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked to my office, closed the door gently, and sat down in front of my old Lenovo ThinkPad. The thing was 10 years out of style, but never failed me. No one ever bothers hacking something that looks like it belongs in a public library. I pulled the external hard drive from the safe, plugged it in, the screen blinked to life. Folder 01, Archive, Alturas Org, Folder 02, Legal Backup, 2017, Folder 3, Clause 12B, Trigger Files. The password prompt blinked like an old friend. I typed in 12 characters, a phrase Martin and I once used as a joke during late-night strategy sessions, back when the company was run on coffee and panic. Only 2 other people ever knew it. One of them was him. The other one doesn't talk anymore. Access granted. I dragged the files into a folder labeled Temp Docs and hit print. 3 copies. Stapled. No logos. Just ink and weight. At the top of the first page, transfer agreement told Clause B. The clause itself was buried deep in the original foundation documents, crafted back when we were still paranoid about hostile takeovers, the kind of clause that seemed overcautious then, but now felt prophetic. Clause 12B, in the event of unethical conduct involving a co-founder's spouse that compromises fiduciary trust or executive judgment, shares may be frozen, investigated, and, if verified, reassigned by internal review pending board majority. No one remembered that clause because no one thought I'd still be watching. The best safes are the ones hidden in plain sight. The documents went into an unmarked folder. I placed them in the bottom drawer under an old pile of invoices next to a fountain pen Claire gave me 10 years ago and hasn't mentioned since. Funny what people forget. At 6:42 p.m., she came downstairs dressed like she'd been carved out of polished marble. Black dress, hair pinned up, lipstick with intent. I was still at the stove, still stirring nothing. She didn't say anything, just hovered by the mirror, adjusted one earring, then walked over to the front hall where her coat waited. As she reached for it, I said, "You look sharp." She glanced back, surprised. "Thanks," she said, like I was a waiter who'd finally remembered the refill. Then she paused. "It's important tonight. Big donors, big accounts." I nodded slowly. "Martin taking you?" A small flicker, just there in her eye. Then gone. "It's easier. You know how these things are." I didn't respond, just watched her slip on the coat. Outside, headlights splashed across the foyer as a black Lincoln pulled into the driveway. She opened the door, then hesitated. "Don't wait up," she repeated. This time she didn't smile when she said it. I let the silence answer for me. Then the door shut. I heard the click of her heels on the concrete, then the muted sound of a car door opening, closing. The engine idled, then faded into the night. And she never looked back, not once, which was perfect, because the move she expected never came. No confrontation, no accusations, no fight in the driveway, or dramatic pleas to stay. The move she didn't expect, that one was already in motion, quiet, unseen, like a fuse buried under silk. And when it reached the charge, she wouldn't even hear the click. Most people at Alturas Consulting thought I was just Claire's husband, the older, quieter guy who tagged along at holiday parties and made half-hearted small talk about wine I didn't drink. To them, I was background, furniture, some relic from her past she hadn't figured out how to toss out yet. And honestly, that suited me. People don't dig into wallpaper. They don't ask questions about what was there before the paint dried. But here's what none of them knew. Alturas started in my garage. My idea. My seed money, my connections. Martin brought charm, pitch decks, and that Gordon Gekko energy that made venture capitalists salivate. I brought infrastructure, operations, legal, the stuff no one sees but everything collapses without. Back when we started, it was a handshake split, 60-40, him in front, me behind. But 5 years in, life happened. My brother's stroke blindsided the family. Someone had to take care of the estate, the mess, the mother half slipping into dementia. Martin offered what he called a gentleman's exit, step back, take care of home, keep a stake, keep a seat on the papers. I agreed. Hell, I was grateful. What I didn't see back then, what I should have seen, was how eager he was to make that arrangement. He said things like, "You'll always be part of this, man," while signing me into the background like a ghost. I wasn't removed, I was strategically dimmed, but I was never gone. My name, still on the Articles of Incorporation, still on the private founders agreement, still connected to legal clauses no one had updated, because Martin's lawyers were flashy, not thorough, the kind who specialized in PR crises and celebrity NDAs, not legacy contract structures. And buried in those documents, under a section called Foundational Fiduciary Protections, is Clause 12B, a failsafe I drafted myself in a paranoid all-nighter fueled by espresso and a podcast about corporate espionage. It read, "In the event of an executive engaging in improper personal conduct involving a founding partner's immediate family, said conduct shall constitute a conflict of interest requiring temporary suspension, fiduciary review, and potential reallocation of authority pending board oversight." At the time, it sounded melodramatic. We even joked about it. Martin laughed when I added the word spouse. He said, "What? You think someone's going to try to sleep with your wife?" I'd shrugged. Don't flatter yourself, Hayes. Ironic, isn't it? Because that clause, the one we laughed over, the one no one revisited for 10 years, it was about to snap shut like a bear trap over his career. You see, the public may not know I exist. They think Alturas is his brainchild, his empire. That's what happens when you let the spotlight addict take all the bows. You become invisible, and invisibility is power if you know how to wield it. I've spent months preparing, tracking Claire and Martin's movements, not just dinners and gala nights, habits, inconsistencies, language, surveillance, yes, emotional data points, even better, screenshots of internal emails forwarded from her office laptop when she forgot to log out. Her phone, she thinks it's secure. It is. But her iCloud backup, not so much. There's a photo taken at a team-building retreat last month. Martin's hand on Claire's lower back, but not casually, intimately, a moment frozen, miscalculated. They thought no one saw, but the camera did, and metadata doesn't lie. But I didn't gather this for revenge, not just revenge, I gathered it for proof, strategic leverage, because there's a difference between being hurt and being armed. When I brought the folder to Teresa Wynn, our original legal counsel, her hands trembled just once. Then she smiled. "Clause 12B, she said, almost in awe. "I always wondered if we'd ever see that come into play." "It's valid?" I asked. "Rock solid," she replied. "If anything, they violated it twice over, with intent." "Good," I said, sliding a USB across the table. "This is just the surface. There's more coming." She leaned back in her chair. "Martin has no idea who he just betrayed." And he didn't. He really didn't. Because the man he thought he was screwing over, the passive husband in the corner, the easy discard, was never passive. He was patient. And worse, he had documentation. And when power is built on perception, paperwork is the quiet wrecking ball no one hears coming. So while Claire adjusted her dress and smiled for the cameras, and Martin polished his fake modesty and gripped his glass of overpriced wine, I was preparing an email, one line of subject text, 12 kilobytes of attached doom, set to send the moment the final piece clicked into place. No drama, no shouting, just documentation and gravity. Let's see if Martin can charm his way out of contract law. The last time I saw Teresa Wynn, she was boxing up her office, humming Sinatra, and giving the middle finger to a farewell cake someone spelled her name wrong on. That was 4 years ago. She'd served as Altura's founding legal counsel, sharp as a scalpel, cold as a courtroom, and had the rare ability to make Martin shut up with a single raised brow. When she left, Martin threw a champagne party, said it was the end of an era. What he meant was, good riddance to the one person who could read the fine print better than I can spin it. I waited until I had everything. Files, timestamps, records, photos, recordings, even a short video clip of Claire and Martin stepping out of a hotel conference room looking just a little too disheveled for networking. No smoking gun, but a trail of gunpowder soaked in gasoline. I needed someone who could ignite it without blowing off my own fingers. So I picked up the phone. Wynn Residence, she answered after half a ring. No trace of sleep, just steel. It's Daniel. A pause. Not surprise. Recognition. I was wondering when you'd reach out, she said. You've been quiet a long time. Quiet's useful, I replied. It lets you hear the things people say when they think you've stopped listening. Another pause, then a dry chuckle. Tell me you have documentation. I do. Surveillance? More than enough. She exhaled like she'd been holding that breath since retirement. Then it's time. I could hear her pulling something from a drawer. Let's take back what was yours. That's the thing about people like Teresa. They don't need to be convinced, they just need a reason. I drove up to her place the next morning. Suburban quiet, gated but modest, the kind of neighborhood where everyone still waves but nobody really talks. Her house was brick and glass, full of shadow and polished oak. She met me at the door with a robe over a blouse, hair tied back, glasses perched low. She looked like she hadn't aged a day since the last board meeting, just sharper, less filtered. You look like hell, she said, nodding at me. Good, that means you're serious. I've been patient. Patience is just revenge with better posture. She led me into a study filled with old contracts and newer whiskey. I handed her a manila folder, a thumb drive, and a printed copy of Clause 12B. She laid them out like tarot cards. She didn't ask what Martin did. She asked when he started. I told her everything, how Claire shifted, how Martin circled, how they fed off secrecy and flirted with audacity like it was foreplay. She listened, didn't interrupt, just took notes. Typical, she muttered. He always liked taking what wasn't his. But your wife? That's a twist. I didn't react. She leaned back. And you waited, collected. Why? Because if I reacted the first time he disrespected me, I'd be another angry husband with a bruised ego. And now I'm a founder reclaiming what was stolen under his watch. She smiled, no warmth, just approval. You still have founder privileges. Legacy seats technically dormant, not dissolved. That means you still have rights to trigger an emergency review, especially under fiduciary breach. And the board? Half of them owe me favors. The other half hate Martin and just needed a push. I nodded slowly. How do we make the push? She opened a drawer, pulled out a slim leather binder labeled Contingency Protocol. Alturas. Dusty but intact. You start by sending one email. Just one? She raised an eyebrow. You really think Martin's empire was built on more than that? She spent the next hour walking me through the legal roadmap. Board procedures, disclosure timelines, what would hold up, what might be challenged. She never said revenge. She said reclamation. That's how she saw it, like restoring balance after a fire. Before I left, she handed me a different document, a memo she'd written years ago, one Martin had buried during his first expansion push. It outlined founder equity safeguards. My signature was on it. So was his. Funny, she said, tapping the page. He thought burying the past meant erasing it. But you kept receipts. I pocketed the memo. When do we go? She smiled. You've already started. As I stepped out into the morning light, something shifted in me. Not anger, not vindication, alignment. I wasn't isolated anymore. I had an ally in the shadows, a ghost from Martin's past who knew every creak in the floorboards of his empire. The difference between us, he built Alturas on charisma and dominance. I built it on contracts. And Teresa Wynn, she was the scalpel I brought to a gunfight. The next move was simple. Let the silence do the cutting. Martin Hayes walked into that Monday morning executive meeting like he'd just stepped off a yacht, sunglasses still on, tan lines sharper than his lapels, that lazy, overfed grin he wore after every conquest, and judging by the spring in his step, he was feeling particularly victorious. He was late, 11 minutes, and made a show of it, slapped backs, threw a rough night, boys, across the room. dropped into his chair at the head of the polished walnut conference table like he was claiming a throne no one dared question. No one laughed. Not this time. The room was too quiet, tense in a way even he couldn't ignore. Phones were face down. Laptops were closed. Not a single coffee cup twitched. Martin's grin wavered. He looked around. What, no welcome back parade? Silence. Then, without a word, Carla, one of the newer board advisors, young but razor-edged, slid a folder across the table to him. Pale blue, no label, just weight. He opened it casually, then he stopped. First page, a photo. Martin and Claire. Close. Very close. At a team dinner 2 weeks ago. Her hand on his chest, his lips too close to her ear. Nothing criminal, but nothing professional either. The next page, a screenshot of a company travel invoice marked internal strategy meeting, filed under Claire's department. Martin's signature at the bottom. The third page, a high-resolution image of Clause 12B with highlights and annotations. His expression didn't change at first. Martin had mastered the poker face, but I could imagine the slow internal realization behind that stone mask, the way the air must have thickened in his lungs. He flipped through a few more pages, then looked up. Okay, I don't know what this is. That's when it happened. Ping. Every phone in the room lit up at once, a perfectly synchronized symphony of dread. Martin reached for his. The email subject line read, "Conflict of interest documentation, action required," from Daniel Mercer to Alturas board and senior leadership. He opened it. There it was, the full documentation pack. 32 attachments, legal memos, surveillance summaries, screenshots of email chains where Claire forwarded confidential reports to Martin without clearance. Expense reports misfiled. A video snippet with no audio. Just a close-up of Martin's hand on Claire's thigh under a restaurant table. The body of the email was brief. Board members, as a founding partner, I am invoking Clause 12B of the foundational agreement due to an executive breach involving personal misconduct with a co-founder's spouse. Supporting documentation attached. Per the clause, I am formally requesting emergency review procedures to begin effective immediately. Daniel Mercer, co-founder, Alturas Consulting. The room didn't breathe. Martin stared at the screen. His face, normally ruddy with ego, went sheet white. He opened one file, then another. His hands started to shake, not tremble, shake. The kind of microquake only someone with everything to lose feels when they realize they've already lost. What the hell is this? He muttered. But it wasn't a challenge. It was a prayer. Carla leaned forward, calm, deadpan. We've already confirmed the documents are authentic, she said. Legal's reviewing them now. Another board member, Devlin, a quiet finance guy, added, and we've reached out to Teresa Wynn. She's reactivating her counsel status for internal review. Martin looked like he'd been punched. You're kidding. No, Carla said. We're not. Someone slid a water bottle toward him. No one met his eyes. He leaned back, slowly, like his spine had just remembered gravity. He scanned the table like a man searching for a single friendly face. He found none. The man who'd walked into the room owning it now looked like a squatter in his own empire. And I wasn't even there. I was home in my study, watching the fallout from a secure server I'd prepped with Teresa. I sipped my coffee while the read receipts came in one by one. Martin had always thought power came from being the loudest, boldest voice in the room. He thought dominance was permanent, untouchable. But here's the truth. No one tells guys like him. Power doesn't scream. It whispers. In policy clauses. In contingency plans. In boring documents no one reads until they're loaded, like a gun. By the time he realized who'd pulled the trigger, the bullet was already traveling. And the silence he once controlled, now it was his sentence. The boardroom at Alturas was built to intimidate. Long glass walls, a 12-seat oak table designed to feel like a courtroom disguised as a think tank. At the head sat a high-back leather chair, slightly taller than the rest, because Martin insisted on visual authority. That Monday afternoon, it stood empty for longer than usual. Martin arrived 10 minutes early, hoping to reclaim the narrative. But it wasn't the same room he left days before, swaggering out with Claire on his arm. This time, no one greeted him. No jokes, no eye contact, just quiet. He sat down, adjusted his tie, and waited for someone, anyone, to meet him halfway. No one did. The boardroom doors closed with a pneumatic sigh. Carla was already seated, tablet in hand. Devlin flipped slowly through a printed version of the email I'd sent, each page sliding like a guillotine blade. Cynthia Price, the oldest member of the board and one of the original investors, cleared her throat. "Let's begin." Martin forced a chuckle. "All right, folks, let's clear the smoke here. I understand emotions are running high and there's been some misunderstanding, but I can assure you 3 members are recusing themselves." Cynthia interrupted, tapping her pen. "Due to direct or indirect personal ties with either you or Claire Reynolds." Martin blinked. "Recusing? On what basis?" Carla didn't look up. "Conflict of interest. They either had dinner at your house, shared vacations, or approved travel expenses connected to the subject of the review. It's in the bylaws, Martin. You helped write them. Remember?" Devlin slid a document across the table. The room watched as Martin read the top line. "Emergency session. Clause 12B enactment review." "No," he muttered. "This is being twisted. Weaponized. Daniel's doing this out of spite. And you gave him the knife." Cynthia replied, her voice steady. "We're not here to dissect feelings. We're here to determine whether an executive's actions present a legal, ethical, and fiduciary conflict of interest." Martin looked up, finally catching Claire's eye. She sat quietly in the gallery behind the glass partition, dressed in slate gray. No jewelry, no expression, just, present. That was the strange part. She didn't look like someone who had come to defend him. She looked like someone who was just trying not to drown in the fallout. He stared at her like a drowning man looks at a passing boat. She blinked once, nothing else. "I want to speak directly to the board," Martin said. "Off the record." Carla raised an eyebrow. "We're past that." He leaned forward, the smirk starting to crack. "You're gonna let a ghost, a man who hasn't been active in this company for years, burn the house down out of jealousy? Are you serious?" Devlin looked up. "He's not burning it down, Martin. He's auditing the foundation. And from where we're sitting, it's riddled with termites." Cynthia cleared her throat again and began to read. "Clause 12B, filed under Foundational Fiduciary Protections, ratified September 2015. In the event of an executive engaging in improper personal conduct involving a founding partner's spouse, said conduct shall constitute a conflict of interest requiring temporary suspension, fiduciary review, and potential reallocation of authority pending board oversight." She looked up. "That's the clause Daniel Mercer authored, that you co-signed, and that was never rescinded." Martin didn't speak. A vote was proposed. No shouting, no fist pounding, just protocol. Quiet, sharp protocol. One by one, hands went up. Devlin, Carla, Cynthia. 2 more followed. A majority. Martin's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The moment hung in the air like an old photograph. Awkward, poorly lit, full of truths people would rather forget. "We'll be initiating the interim leadership process," Carla announced. "Teresa Wynn has agreed to rejoin temporarily as oversight counsel. Per the agreement, Daniel Mercer may appoint or delegate interim authority." Martin rose slowly, as if anything faster would make him shatter. He turned toward Claire again, this time with something like pleading in his eyes. She didn't stand, didn't speak. Her hands stayed clasped in her lap. Martin stood in the silence of a room that used to orbit him and finally understood something terrifying. He was irrelevant now. No one shouted him down. No one had to, because the man he underestimated hadn't even shown up. I wasn't there, not out of fear, out of design. Why breathe the same air as a man already suffocating in his own arrogance? Let the silence do the cutting. Let the paperwork pull the trigger. And let the boardroom watch as its king discovered the throne had never really been his. Claire came home that night just before 10, keys jangling with that same crisp cadence she always had, the sound of a woman who'd mastered timing, entrances, exits. I was in the den, lights low, the fireplace flickering across a glass of bourbon I hadn't touched. The door opened, then closed. No greeting. She moved through the house like a guest who wasn't sure if her name was still on the deed, heels on hardwood, then bare feet on tile. The kitchen light clicked on. She stood there a minute, still wearing her coat, clutching her phone in both hands like it might suddenly explain itself. Something's wrong, she said. No hello, just that. I didn't respond. She looked up. My card's declined. My badge won't scan. My company email's dead. What the hell is going on? I took a sip. Finally. She walked into the den, clutching that phone like a lifeline, but her voice had dropped, softer now, laced with something between confusion and dread. Daniel, she said, what did you do? I looked up at her, calm. I didn't do anything to you. She blinked. Oh, cut the Zen act. This is about him, isn't it? Martin? I said. Her jaw tightened. You were jealous. You wanted to punish me for something that never even... No, I interrupted, voice quiet. Not jealousy. Clarity. She paused, just for a breath. Enough. I reached to the side and slid a folder across the table. Manila. Unassuming. Just a small paper hinge with the weight of 10 years behind it. She stared at it like it might bite her. Open it, I said. She didn't, not right away. Then slowly, reluctantly, she reached forward and cracked it open. The first photo, her and Martin outside the Hotel Illyria, not last week, 4 months ago, his hand on her lower back, her leaning in, no room between them. Second photo, a bar in Chicago, a moment caught in the glass of a mirror behind them, her hand on his chest, his tie loosened, both of them grinning at something private. Third, a scanned page of the original Alturas Foundation agreement, highlighted, Clause 12B. She said nothing. I leaned back in my chair. You know what hurts the most? She finally looked at me. That you thought I didn't notice, I said. That you thought your silence and excuses and carefully chosen outfits would cover what was already unraveling. Her mouth opened slightly. Nothing came out. I didn't lose you, Claire, I said. You lost yourself. She took a slow breath, hands gripping the folder like it might anchor her. I didn't mean for it to. Stop. She froze. I kept my voice steady. Whatever you're about to say next, don't. Not because I don't want to hear it, but because I already did. For months. In every avoidance, in every late meeting, in every time you looked at me like I was your obligation instead of your partner. She blinked hard. Once. I was your partner, I said. At home. At work. In the foundation of the company. You forgot that last part. Or maybe Martin made you forget. Her voice cracked. He told me you'd moved on. That you'd let go. I laughed, not out of humor, out of awe. Let go? I echoed. Claire, I built that company. Every system he brags about, I wrote the architecture. Every policy he tried to sidestep, I drafted the loophole. And every time you chose not to tell me what was happening between you two, I took notes. Patiently. Thoroughly. I didn't cheat, she said quietly. Not really. I tilted my head. Define really. Her lips parted again, but the words tangled before they left. I stood up, walking past her slowly, carefully, like someone stepping around a shattered vase. I didn't want this, I said. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. But when you gave that away, when you sold it for wine-soaked hotel rooms and career opportunities, you made a choice. You just thought I wouldn't respond. She turned, following me with her eyes. Where does this leave us? I paused near the stairs. You should ask Martin. He's the one who promised you a future. Daniel? No, I said again. You don't get to plead now, not after months of performance, not after watching me get sidelined at my own table. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So what happens next? I looked back at her, really looked. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't see my wife. I saw someone I used to trust, someone who traded quiet loyalty for loud attention, someone who gambled wrong. What happens next, I said, is entirely up to you, but whatever future you imagined, it's no longer built on my silence. Then I walked upstairs. Behind me, the folder remained on the table, open, exposed, just like she was now. The next morning, before the sun even cracked the sky, Alturas released a press statement so clean and surgical it could have been written by a PR team with a scalpel, which of course it was. The headline was simple, cold. For immediate release, organizational transition at Alturas Consulting. Below it, in smaller font, Effective immediately, Martin Hayes will be stepping down from his role as Chief Executive Officer pending the outcome of an internal review prompted by a conflict of interest concern. Interim executive oversight will be assumed by founding partner Daniel Mercer in collaboration with returning legal counsel Teresa Wynn. Alturas remains committed to transparency, integrity, and the continuation of its core mission. That's all. 3 paragraphs, a few hundred words. But the photo, that's what did it. Front and center, me, haircut, beard trimmed down to a sharp jawline, crisp navy suit, no tie, calm face, hands clasped loosely in front of me, like I was explaining something obvious to someone who just now decided to listen. To my left, Carla. To my right, Teresa Wynn, sharp as ever in black. Behind us, the Alturas logo, now looking less like Martin's crown and more like the backdrop to his tombstone. There was no photo of Martin. Just a statement of absence, a void where power used to sit. Claire saw it on her phone while stirring coffee she wasn't drinking. The moment it loaded, her hand froze midair. The spoon kept spinning on its own, before finally clinking against the side of the mug. She blinked at the headline like it might rearrange itself. Then she read it again and again. Her fingers shook as she tapped the screen. The image was in every feed. LinkedIn, Bloomberg, even that smug little startup blog she used to show me at dinner, gushing over Martin's visionary leadership. Now, that same blog was running quotes from anonymous sources about a long history of unchecked boundaries and a toxic culture under investigation. But it was the comment section that buried the knife. Daniel Mercer's back. Thought he retired years ago. This explains why Martin's been phoning it in lately. Wynn and Mercer at the helm again? Damn, they're not playing. Claire scrolled faster, then slower. She searched for a denial, a walk back, anything that suggested this was temporary, some PR stunt to calm investors. But what she saw was worse. Control had shifted, and the man she thought she'd maneuvered around like an aging piece of furniture was now in the center of the frame, firm, deliberate still. She didn't see rage in that photo. She saw peace, that kind of unnerving calm a man wears only when he's already solved the puzzle, burned the pieces, and built something better from the ashes. In a quiet room with her untouched coffee and that spiraling gut feeling she couldn't swallow, Claire finally saw me. Not the husband waiting in the wings, not the background, not the man she outgrew, but the man she underestimated. And that realization, it didn't come with an apology. It came with the sound of a future she thought she had being rewritten without her. Across town, Martin wasn't answering his phone. His attorney had issued a blanket no comment, and half the board was already preparing to turn him into a case study on executive failure. But Claire, she sat in the kitchen we used to share, staring at the screen like it had just declared her obsolete. She'd bet on the wrong man. And the worst part, he hadn't even needed to say her name. Just show up. That was all it took. Because power doesn't need volume. It needs timing and presence. And I'd returned with both. The meeting took place in one of the private lounges on the 23rd floor, the kind of space designed for back-channel deals and executive whispers. No security detail, no lawyers, no assistants with iPads pretending not to listen. Just us. I arrived first. The room was dim, all walnut paneling and leather-bound silence. A single bottle of Japanese whiskey sat untouched on a sideboard. 2 glasses, I didn't pour any. Martin walked in like a man still trying to wear his past authority, but now it hung off him like an ill-fitting jacket. Sloppy, sweating through his collar. He'd shaved, but there was a tremble in his hands he couldn't hide. He closed the door gently, almost reverently. Maybe for effect, maybe because he thought slamming it would give away how badly he needed this conversation. "You look good," he said, his voice softer than I remembered it. I didn't respond. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly, like the act of lowering himself carried too much weight. A pause, then, "You know, I never saw you coming." I gave him a small smile. "That's why it worked." He chuckled, bitter, hollow. "Jesus, Daniel, you used to be the guy who apologized when the waiter got your order wrong." I nodded. "Still do, but I don't apologize for being underestimated." He ran a hand down his face, eyes tired. "You think this fixes something?" "No," I said calmly. "This wasn't about fixing." He leaned in slightly, like he was trying to claw his way back into relevance. "She chose me, you know." There it was, That last desperate thread, the final weapon of a man who's lost everything else, the claim that he won something personal. I met his eyes, dead on. And the company chose integrity. He scoffed. That's what this was about? Morals? No, I said. It was about what's mine. He blinked. Alturas wasn't yours to taint, I continued. You thought because I stepped away, I disappeared. You thought your charisma was the engine, but I built the rails, the system, the rules, and I never stopped watching. You let it happen, he said. You let her. I let you bury yourself, I interrupted, because some lessons need to be permanent. His expression darkened. She's not coming back to you. That's not the point, I said. He sat back, and for the first time the full weight of what had happened seemed to hit him. Not just the job, not just the board vote, but the unraveling of his image. He wasn't a mogul now. He was a cautionary tale, a relic wrapped in bad press. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, no rush. He looked up, searching for something. Anger, a flinch, maybe even a plea. He found nothing. This isn't revenge, I said. It's reclamation of the company, my name, and, frankly, my self-respect. He opened his mouth. I cut him off. You got too comfortable sitting at the throne, I said. You forgot who built the castle. Then I turned toward the door. Before I could reach it, he asked quietly, So what now? You ride off into the sunset? Again? Save the world? I paused with my hand on the knob. No, I said over my shoulder. I just enjoy watching you learn the difference between being feared and being respected. Then I left him there, alone, in the shell of the kingdom he thought he ruled. Let him sit in the silence. Let him try to remember the last time someone said no to him and meant it. Let him finally understand what it feels like when the man you dismissed as irrelevant turns out to be the one who never stopped playing the game and played it better. The dining room was quiet, intentionally so. No velvet ropes, no stage lights. Just a long table tucked into the private floor of the Alder Club, an old converted bank downtown where deals were made quietly and fortunes grew in the shade. 10 seats, all filled. Teresa at my left, her notes neat and untouched. Across from us, 4 new investors, mid-30s, sharp suits, no-nonsense eyes. They'd read the headlines, knew the shake-up at Altura's, knew who Martin Hayes used to be. Now they were here to meet the man who'd replaced him, and hadn't said a single word to the press. Just moved. I stood and gave a short toast. Nothing dramatic, just enough to mark the beginning of something that wasn't branded with anyone else's name but mine. To stability, I said, to architecture over spectacle, and to remembering that the foundation of any great company isn't who smiles the widest, it's who survives the storm. Subtle nods. Glasses clinked. I sat down again, and then I felt it, a light tap on my shoulder. I turned. She was there. Claire, dressed in black, sleek, understated, not the dramatic couture she wore on Martin's arm. This was toned down, lips painted deep red, eyes tired, makeup precise like armor. The room fell into soft murmurs around us. She didn't ask to speak in private. That wasn't her style anymore. She just looked at me like the silence between us was her last remaining leverage. I didn't know who you really were, she said, voice soft but pointed. I studied her a moment, measured. Not unkind, just final. You didn't need to, I said. You just needed to respect it. Her lips pressed together. She glanced at Teresa, who returned the stare like she was carving her name into stone. Claire leaned in, whispering, Can we talk? I paused. Let it sit between us. Let her think, just for a second, that maybe the door hadn't closed all the way. Then I shook my head. I already made my move, I said quietly, and I don't undo checkmates. Her eyes flickered, hurt, anger, something she tried to swallow before it showed. But it did, just for a second. I stepped past her slowly, walking back toward the table. As I reached Teresa, she leaned in and murmured, Was that closure? No, I said, sitting down. That was the echo. Across the room, Claire stood still for a moment longer, unsure what to do with her hands, her face, her entire presence now that the performance had no audience. Then she turned and walked out, heels soft, pace quick. She left nothing behind, not a word, not a breath. And that was perfect, because the final move was never about her. It wasn't even about Martin. It was about precision. Timing, impatience sharp enough to cut bone. No raised voices, no tantrums, no dramatic farewells, just execution. Because in the end, the man they underestimated didn't need to roar, he just needed to act. And now, they were all living in the silence I left behind.